The studio lights were dazzling, cameras hummed softly, and millions of eyes across continents were glued to their screens. The atmosphere inside the sprawling, ultra-modern news studio was electric but calm, for now. Burkinabe leader Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly at the panel, his expression steady, but his eyes sharp, reflecting years of struggle, hope, and quiet strength. Across from him sat Melania Trump, poised and graceful, the First Lady of the United States. The moderator smiled politely, ready to start the global discussion on U.S.-Africa relations. But beneath the polished veneer of diplomacy, tension simmered. The air was thick with unspoken questions. Millions were waiting, not just for answers, but for something real, raw, and powerful. Suddenly, Traoré's gaze hardened. He wasn't here to play nice. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the moment his voice broke the polite silence, trembling with a fierce passion. "Your husband is a criminal," he said, his words slicing through the hum like lightning. The studio gasped. Melania's face froze, shocked and silent. The world held its breath. The broadcast froze for a split second. Then chaos erupted. The LED panels glowed brighter, casting eerie colors on the stunned faces in the studio. Reporters whispered urgently off camera. Viewers across the globe paused their scrolling, mouths agape. Traoré's words echoed, not just in the studio, but in hearts and minds worldwide. Melania's composure cracked. Her eyes darted between Traoré and the moderator, searching for a lifeline, for a way to turn back the clock to moments before the explosion. But the accusation hung heavy in the air. This was no casual insult. It was a revelation laced with the weight of truth. Traoré's voice grew steadier, fueled by years of witnessing injustice. "The world deserves to know. The crimes committed are not just allegations. They are documented, undeniable," he said. His tone was fierce but respectful, a man demanding justice not from anger, but from a deep, burning responsibility. The studio lights flickered, capturing every bead of sweat on his brow, every blink of shock on Melania's face. The moment was irreversible. Melania Trump's mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence stretched uncomfortably long, more powerful than any shouted rebuttal could have been. The camera zoomed in on her face, the hesitation, the shock, the sudden vulnerability. For a moment, she wasn't the former First Lady. She was just a woman caught in a storm much bigger than herself. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged nervous glances. Social media exploded instantly with hashtags trending worldwide. Some praised Traoré's courage, others defended Melania, but all watched, captivated, unable to look away. Traoré sat back slightly, his chest rising and falling, eyes never leaving Melania's. This wasn't about personal attacks. It was about truth, about calling out power when it shields wrongdoing. Millions of viewers felt their hearts pounding, their breaths caught in their throats. The tension in the studio was unbearable. What would Melania say next? Would the truth finally break free or be buried deeper in silence? The world waited, and the story was just beginning. The studio was now a furnace of tension. Every eye fixed on Melania, waiting for her response. But the silence stretched, thick and heavy, an unbearable weight pressing down on everyone watching. Behind the cameras, the producers whispered urgently. This was no ordinary broadcast. It was a turning point. Millions of viewers worldwide sat frozen, hearts pounding. Social media exploded with shocked reactions and questions that no one yet dared to fully answer. Ibrahim Traoré sat calm but resolute, his voice echoing in the minds of everyone watching. He wasn't just accusing. He was demanding accountability for years of silence, for pain too long ignored. The accusation was not just about politics or power. It was about justice, truth, and the courage to speak up when it matters most. Traoré's passion was born from personal loss and the hopes of a better future for his people. Some felt hope rising, others fear. But one thing was certain. This moment would be remembered. The world was witnessing history unfold, live. Finally, Melania's lips moved, her voice barely above a whisper at first. I need to understand, she said, eyes searching Traoré's. What do you mean by criminal? What are you accusing my husband of? Traoré leaned forward, his eyes blazing with the fire of conviction. You speak as if you do not know. But the truth is everywhere. Corruption, greed, harm done to millions while the powerful hide behind walls of lies. The studio lights flickered, as if reflecting the storm raging in the room. Melania's face tightened. The weight of what was said pressed heavily on her. It was clear she had lived a life of privilege. Yet now, in that moment, something inside her cracked. The audience could feel it, a woman confronting a truth she'd long avoided. This was no staged drama. It was real, raw, and painful. Millions felt tears welling up as they watched two worlds collide. As Melania struggled for words, Traoré's voice softened, filled with compassion. This is not to hurt you, he said gently. It is for justice, for the innocent who suffer because of the actions of those in power. He paused, looking beyond the cameras, beyond the studio walls, to the people listening in homes, villages, and cities far away. My country, my people, have felt the pain of broken promises and stolen futures. I speak for them. The studio's glow seemed to dim, replaced by a solemn hush. The moment was no longer about politics. It was about humanity. Viewers wiped tears from their cheeks. Some whispered prayers. Others clenched fists, moved by Traoré's courage and honesty. In that moment, the world saw a leader who was fearless, not because he sought conflict, but because he dared to speak truth to power, even when it meant standing alone. The studio's bright lights couldn't hide the shadows creeping into the conversation. Ibrahim Traoré's eyes held a mixture of sorrow and determination, a man who had carried the weight of his people's pain for too long. I didn't come here to accuse for drama's sake, he said softly. I come bearing stories of families torn apart, dreams shattered by the greed and lies of those who promised change, but brought only suffering. Melania's eyes flickered with a mix of confusion and pain. The world behind her polished image was unraveling in ways she had never faced publicly. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. If what you say is true, why hasn't the world seen it? Why hasn't justice been served? Traoré's gaze didn't waver. Because the truth is silenced. Because those in power use their influence to hide their crimes. But the people remember, and they will rise. Outside the studio, millions held their breath. This was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. The live broadcast suddenly felt like a sacred confession. Melania's hands trembled slightly, betraying her inner storm. I grew up believing in hope, she whispered. Believing that people could change. But maybe I was wrong. Traoré's voice softened, carrying the pain of a continent that had long suffered. Hope is powerful, but truth must come first. Without truth, hope is fragile, easily broken by lies. The LED screens behind them flickered, casting ghostly lights that seemed to dance with the weight of history. For a moment, the studio was silent, except for the quiet hum of equipment. Viewers felt an ache in their chests, as if the pain of distant lives was suddenly inside their own homes. Traoré wasn't just a leader. He was a beacon of honesty in a world clouded by deceit. Melania looked down, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. The walls built by privilege were cracking, and she seemed to realize that the world's gaze had shifted, and there was no turning back. Traoré leaned forward, his voice firm yet filled with a hopeful urgency. This moment is bigger than us, bigger than this studio. It is a call to everyone watching, no matter where you live, to open your eyes, to listen, and to demand the truth. He paused, letting his words settle like a gentle storm. Because silence only protects the guilty. Justice begins when we stop looking away. Melania's eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a fragile, uneasy bridge of understanding. The broadcast wasn't just news anymore. It was a movement. Across continents, viewers wiped tears, hearts pounding, minds racing. Traoré's courage sparked something raw and real, a fire in the souls of those who had long felt powerless. In that studio, under the dazzling lights and the weight of history, two worlds had collided. And from that collision, a new story was beginning. One of truth, courage, and the hope for justice. The bright studio lights shone down, but Traoré's voice carried the weight of 1,000 unheard cries. I stand not for myself, but for every mother who has lost her child, for every family shattered by greed, he said quietly but firmly. For too long, silence has been the weapon of the powerful. Melania's eyes filled with tears, unseen by many, but visible to millions watching. She felt the burden of the words, not just as a woman, but as someone facing a truth too heavy to ignore. Outside the studio, the world held its breath. This wasn't just a broadcast, it was a reckoning. The faces of the suffering flickered in the minds of viewers, real people with real pain, echoes of forgotten stories across continents. Traoré's courage wasn't about anger. It was about love for his people, about a relentless hope for justice. His voice broke through the noise of politics, reaching the hearts of those who longed to believe again. For the first time on live television, Melania Trump's defenses crumbled. She looked down, struggling to find words that could fill the vast emptiness in her heart. I never imagined, she whispered. The world I knew wasn't what I thought. The cameras caught every flicker of emotion, her shock, her sorrow, the dawning of understanding. Millions felt the raw humanity behind her poised exterior. She was no longer just a symbol of privilege, but a woman facing a painful truth. Traoré softened his gaze, not as an enemy, but as a fellow human being. This moment is painful, yes, but it is also a chance for healing, for change. Melania nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. The studio seemed to pause, the energy shifting from confrontation to compassion. For many, this was the moment hope returned. Traoré's voice grew softer, filled with empathy and understanding. Behind every headline there are untold stories, stories of courage, of silent battles fought by those who never make the news. He looked beyond the cameras, to the countless unseen faces, workers, mothers, children, who suffered quietly under the weight of injustice. My fight is theirs. My voice is theirs. The studio lights dimmed slightly, reflecting the somber mood. Viewers felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of sadness and admiration. Traoré's bravery had not only called out corruption, but had given a voice to the voiceless. Melania wiped her tears, her heart heavy, but open. This was no longer just a broadcast. It was a shared human moment, a call to see beyond the surface. The world was watching, and no one would forget this day. Outside the studio, the world was aflame. Social media erupted with reactions, some angry, some hopeful, but all captivated. Traoré's words had stirred a ripple that no power could silence. People from small villages to big cities discussed the courage it took to speak such truth live. In homes, families gathered around screens, wiping tears as they saw a leader who wasn't afraid to face the harsh realities. Ibrahim Traoré became more than a name. He was a symbol of bravery, a voice for the powerless. Melania, meanwhile, faced a personal reckoning. Behind closed doors, she questioned everything she had believed. The luxury and silence had shielded her, but now the walls were crumbling. Her tears reflected not just sorrow but awakening. This moment was more than news. It was a turning point. Traoré's message echoed beyond the broadcast. Change starts when we stop ignoring the pain around us. The studio lights dimmed, but the impact shone brighter than ever. Back in the studio, Traoré's face carried the fatigue of a man who had carried his people's pain for too long. "Truth is a heavy burden," he said quietly, "but it's the only way forward." He spoke of the nights spent comforting families, the endless struggle against corruption that stole dreams and futures. His passion was born from love. Love for his country, for justice, for hope. Melania listened, tears streaming. The strength in Traoré's voice was undeniable. Here was a man who bore not hatred, but a fierce determination to right the wrongs that had lasted too long. Viewers felt their hearts swell with empathy. This wasn't just politics, it was humanity laid bare. Traoré wasn't just confronting an opponent, he was carrying the hopes of millions on his shoulders. The final moments in the studio were quiet but powerful. Traoré looked directly into the camera, his voice steady and full of hope. "This moment is not the end. It is the beginning. A new dawn for justice, truth, and unity." Melania, wiping away her tears, nodded slowly. She spoke softly. "Maybe it's time we all listened more, judged less, and sought healing." The world watched, breathless and moved. A leader's courage had pierced the veil of silence, awakening hearts and minds everywhere. In that dazzling studio, history was made, not with loud shouts, but with honest words and shared pain. Millions felt a surge of hope. Change was possible, healing was possible, and it all began with one voice refusing to be silenced. The studio buzz faded as Ibrahim Traoré's voice grew steady and strong. "I stand not to attack, but to defend the dignity of millions who have suffered in silence." His eyes shone with fierce determination, a quiet strength born from years of sacrifice. Melania's expression softened, the shock replaced by respect. She realized this was no longer just a confrontation. It was a moment of truth and humanity. The world had witnessed something rare, a leader unafraid to speak justice to power. Traoré's words cut through the noise, touching hearts far beyond the studio walls. Justice is not a weapon for revenge, but a shield for the vulnerable. This fight is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who believes in fairness. Millions watched, some crying, many inspired. Traoré's courage had become a beacon of hope in a world too often clouded by silence and fear. Melania's eyes glistened with tears as she took a breath and said softly, "I have lived behind walls of comfort, unaware of the pain so many endure. Today, I see the truth in a way I never could before." Her voice cracked, but her words were genuine, a powerful admission of awakening. "Maybe it's time we all listen, not to defend, but to understand." Traoré nodded, a small but hopeful smile breaking through his solemnity. "It is through understanding that we find healing, and through healing, we find the strength to build a better world." The studio, once filled with tension, now shimmered with a fragile but real hope. Viewers wiped their tears, hearts heavy yet lighter, touched by the raw honesty between two very different souls. As the broadcast drew to a close, Traoré's voice resonated with a call to action. Let this moment remind us all, truth matters, courage matters, and together we can rise beyond fear and injustice. Melania smiled softly, a silent promise of change. Millions of viewers felt a deep stirring, a mixture of sorrow, hope, and the undeniable power of truth. This was not just an ending, it was a beginning. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Share your thoughts, your hopes, your own stories. Let's keep this conversation alive, because together, our voices can bring real change. Don't just watch, be part of the movement.